I'm trying, but I thought I was lagging because I'm way up here in Canada. But if Perry's having trouble hearing you, I'm probably getting the same quality of signal as he is.
Yep. I
Okay.
think it's Scott.
Okay. I'm going to try to record. But who's that? Who's offering to record?
That's Chop's eye.
Oh, Chop. Oh, thanks, Chop. Okay. Perfect. Go ahead, Renee. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, so a couple things right off the bat. I've got an interior recessed light that I use, and it's purpose built for this type of thing. And so I'm just going to go ahead and replace these. I've uploaded these in the forums, and at the end of the session, maybe we can gather some of the information I'm putting here and provide you guys with some of the materials I'm going to be using. So first off, I'm going to replace everything on this floor. And I'm going to pick this light that I've got, and it's called LED 4. And you're going to immediately see that we get some movement on the walls here. It's not not a point light anymore. It's going to be a spotlight. The next thing I want to do is I want to adjust my sun. I want to actually set this up so that we've got some movement in the room. The sun's going to be coming through the windows. That's a pretty common thing for us all to be looking at.
Renee, real quick, you're in render, aren't you? You're not in PBR, are you?
This is in PBR right now.
Oh, it is. Sorry.
So this is starting from what Scott gave me, and then I'm going to work through this, and we're going to see what we can do to kind of improve the look of this. And so I kind of already know what I want here is -40, and we're going to do like 140. And this is going to peek the sun through the window like that. And then just from here, I like to take a sample of what I'm looking at. I want to look at, the quality of the light in the room. So, I encourage people to pin some things to their taskbar, one of which is pull the color and the texture out of the room. And when you do that, you can kind of analyze, what your shadows are looking like in the room and what you need to adjust and how your materials are working and what's bouncing off where. And then if I put color back.
How did you do that real quick?
I have these pinned to a toolbar, and so I'm just toggling them in a toolbar. But if you search, you can see that there's if you go into your customized toolbar options and you search textures, textures is actually a toggleable item. You can drag this into your toolbar and then toggle textures. Same thing with color. So I toggle those two things. So right now we're looking at the scene devoid of texture files. And so we're still seeing normals and roughness maps. We're just not seeing the actual texture file, which is what I would call a diffuse file. And so from here, I want to go in and I'm going to adjust my lights. Actually, first, let's take a look back at the sun. Let's just make this something like a bright neon red. And you can get an idea of where the sun's coming in. But what PBR will do was it's going to trace this if you give it enough time. And you can see how much effect we're getting from the sun. So that if I turn the sun off, now we're just going to get an interior scene with just the lights that I've provided. So now if we put texture back into the scene, we can just kind of see, where our trouble spots are, what the lights are doing. You could do the same thing with these lights, as you could turn them on or off and make them neon green and see what they're interacting with, right? So this is all just about light analysis. Basically what we did by turning off the color and the texture is we created what's called like a clay rendering. Everything's, a white grade. And this is just for analyzing a scene so that I can figure out what I need to do to make it, be to my standard. So let me turn sun back on. And let's adjust that back. And so now that I have that back, I want to go to my technique options in PBR. And I'm going to turn my camera exposure down. I'm also going to improve my lighting quality. And something that improving the lighting quality does is, if you guys ever have any problems with the sun coming into the room and reflecting off the floor where your baseboard would be, which doesn't make any sense. Your reflection should be, you know, triangulated through the window. Like, here's the start of our reflection right here, at the bottom of the floor here. Sometimes that's not always the case. There's a glitch in Chief Architect's PBR where sometimes you'll get your reflection right at the baseboard. So that improved lighting quality a lot of times fixes that problem. So the next thing is, you know, quality of materials is going to make a huge difference in a scene. I've got, let me move this GoToMeeting over to the side here. I've got materials I've saved. I've got, you know, a brushed nickel that looks pretty good. This this countertop material that we've got here, I've got, you know, high-end, high-resolution materials that I can use. Let's take a look here. Sorry, one of my buttons is not working. Don't know why. Guys, I'm sorry, I got to pause for 1 second here. Can everybody still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Is this not
I do like that brushed nickel that you're using. That's really nice.
working? Yeah, and so I'll upload all of these textures that I'm going to use here. If I can get this to work. Jeez, it's not working. Okay. So I'm using the adjust material definition. This opens up our material dialog. And you know, you take a look at this, take a look at it real close, and it's just, this is kind of chief standard. They use like a 512 by 512 resolution texture file, and they just don't look as good as they could. So I've got texture files that are just, you know, higher resolution. You can immediately see the difference in the quality of the texture. And then oftentimes, this is in the properties tab.
Sorry, what did you do to make that much better? Just quickly.
You know, it's just I have a collection of these materials that I just get off the internet. I actually paid a kid $18 an hour to search materials with normals maps, and they produced this for me, believe it or not. They did a fantastic job. I told them how I wanted my folder structure to be, and they saved it in a folder for me, and I've been using it ever since, and this has been probably 10 years down the road. So and something to get into in these materials is there's you have 5 or 6 actually available maps you can do to create very complex materials. And when you do these materials, it really changes the overall look of your project. And those maps are, we've got bump map, normal map, ambient occlusion, which I will call an AO map. And then we've got roughness and metal map. Now, roughness takes a black and white gradient map, and it turns anything that's black into a high polish, anything that's white into a matte finish. So in the case of this, I'm going to actually grab this roughness map here that I've already got created, and you're going to see what it does when I move this map around. You can see there's a little bit of pitting, and that's from the roughness map itself. Let's just take a look at a different.
I just muted Doug Norton.
Yeah, I heard that. So if you can see in the shine off, you know, of the light generated off the ceiling, we've got some pitting. That is just from this roughness map I've added. And so as you build these materials, you save them as defaults, and then pretty soon when you build out a kitchen, you don't really need to spend any time. It's already got these quality materials, and they look pretty fantastic. So another big thing I'm going to get into, especially for interiors, is ambient occlusion, AO. And what ambient occlusion does is it can create a shadow when it's got ambient light lighting up that shadow disappears. It can create a shadow when you have too much ambient light. And I'm just going to grab this. It's also black and white gradient map. And I don't know if you noticed it. I'm going to turn this off again. Notice that the whole texture itself got kind of dark when I added that on there. This is because I don't have an abundance of ambient light in this section. So it reverts to that map. And you'll see what happens in the plan itself is up here in corners where we don't have a lot of direct light lighting this surface. As the PBR reworks, it's going to get a lot darker up in these corners, which is a little bit more realistic. We're getting some kind of dynamic range, some dynamic contrast in the scene. You can now see that pitting in the background. You know, maybe it's a little excessive, but for the purpose of us just figuring this out, you know, it's kind of a neat trick, right? And so same thing with these walls is that I actually have a material that uses a gradient map in the ambient occlusion field from dark to light. And it's putting a lot of ambient light up here in the corner, ambient occlusion up in the corner. And then it kind of fades down to no ambient occlusion down at the bottom. Same thing if we were to go ahead and grab your floor material. This is what Scott used as his floor material. If I go to texture properties, I go to ambient occlusion. If I just put I'm going to go to solid colors. If I put, I'll give you an example. I'll put this 100 map on it. It's just a black map in ambient occlusion. You're immediately going to see that anything that is not under direct light is going to turn very dark. And so that's kind of an important thing to wrap your head around, because you can set up your materials so that they have, you know, this is a constant problem in Chief Architect is underneath items like a couch, this would be illuminated if you didn't use this ambient occlusion, and it would just look fake. So we're fudging our shadows by using, you know, some form of a gray map to create a shadow where there's no direct light. And we're going to do the same thing on the ceiling. And I'm going to put them a little darker than I usually would, just to kind of illustrate the point. Okay, so now if I edit my active camera, and this is another toolbar item you can put in your system here. It looks like this little icon over here, if you guys can see my mouse. There is a slider for the active camera's ambient occlusion. So if I turn it all the way down, we're going to see what happens when this camera is no longer using that ambient occlusion. You see that the ceiling immediately got a lot lighter. Just the corners up here, the corners, you know, where the granite is, everything got a lot lighter. And it almost looks like the whole room is, you know, got a haze over it. So that if we turn that back on, we just seem to get a little bit more depth out of the scene when we're utilizing that ambient occlusion. And so then if we just pull that color out again and the textures out again, we can really see that we've kind of improved their overall, you know, shading contrast, reflections, etc. in the room. Now I'm going to show you guys another trick. We're not going to get too far into this scene. Just a couple things to note on cabinets. I always take every cabinet I've got, and in your box data box, let's see, your box construction. Oh, excuse me, no, it's under general. Where it is it box? I always round my corners by at least a 1/16, if not an 1/8. It just looks more realistic to me. I get a soft edge on this corner. I also always add an eased edge to my countertop molding, and that's going to soften up the look of all your cabinet edges and your countertop edges. Because right now, you know, we're getting these really sharp corners, and they just don't seem that realistic versus putting. Let's just take a look real quick. Sorry, I have two toolbar items that are not working. Let's see.
This always happens when you're trying to show something.
Right, exactly. So, you know, it softens the look. I'll do the same thing with symbols. I'll take and I had this in a previous video that I uploaded, but I'll take a symbol like a refrigerator. I'll open the symbol up using just the open symbol tab in your toolbar, and I'll look at the smoothing angle and oftentimes crank this up to something like 80 if it's got some round features. Like these handlebars look really rigid and stiff. You know, turning up the smoothing angle will kind of soften that up. And then so if you put a nice metal material on top of that, we finally start to get some of these eased edges.
Does that degrade the performance?
Not at all. Well, if you take it up too far, anytime you're getting over about 100 degrees of smoothing angle, a lot of times you'll start seeing the faces and vertices of the item. But you can see that in the preview of the symbol dialog. So if we go back and open this up again, and let's just crank this all the way up to, sure, 180. And we're looking at, this is a standard view, vector view. That should be right. You'll start to see some problems in the model right here. Let's just crank it even farther. Some models really do well with this, and other models you'll just start to see some artifacts in the model. And actually this one, well, you can see, you know, turning it up to 360 is really, it's making this round return here at all the edges. So it's a little bit undesirable there. But on the whole, that actually responded pretty well to a really high smoothing angle. And you can see what it does is you can really start to get some movement on that item, which is especially nice for anything that's going to take some kind of a metal polish on it, right? Metal material. It's a pretty funny looking refrigerator. So I wanted to show you guys kind of one more thing that's a curious way of doing things is if I don't want to rely on the sun, I'm going to do a user added light, right? So I'm going to pop a light in right here. You've got these turned off for this scene. And let's open this guy up. I know that right now this kitchen is on the second floor. We're at like 200 inches. So I'm going to make the elevation of this light 260 inches. And actually, let's open it up again. And I'm going to crank this up to something like 35,000. So I'm mimicking the sun. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the sun off. And for now, I'm just going to make this a neon green because I really want to see how this is coming into the room. I'm going to put it to some kind of a sun angle. Let's just call it 38 degrees tilt. So that tilts that down. And I'm not worried about anything else right now. And I'll increase my cutoff angle, and let's just kind of point that in the general direction of this window. Here's my camera over here. Makes sense. Let's get back in it. And so I'm going to see the sun is going to be fighting that light. So I'm going to turn off my sun. So I'm going to toggle that off. And I have that in my side toolbars. All these items right here, you know, I utilize them every time I'm doing some kind of a 3D scene. So you've got a reflection toggle, shadow toggle, color toggles, sunlight, adjust your sunlight textures toggles. So now I need to go in and adjust my lights. And by default, you only have 8 lights lighting up this room. And I'm going to go ahead and turn that up to 100. And we're going to get a little bit of lag here. And then I'm going to turn off all of my lights, and then I'm going to go in and select just my user add lights to turn those back on. So we're not processing all of that at once. So there we go. Now we see my, my own generated sun. So Chief has a little glitch in it that I've been utilizing. I haven't really told anybody about it, but it's kind of a curious one. If I turn this light into not 100% black, but just above black, 12, 12, and 12 is our RGB values here. And go ahead and click OK. And then I'm going to go down and I'm going to do the same thing to my interior lights. And what's going to happen is my exterior scene is all of a sudden going to show up. And it's going to look like I have a user-generated sun. And so the interesting thing about this is if we took a screenshot before I did this, which I should have done just to show you guys the comparison, what you would notice is you're getting a lot more contrast in these pillows, in the shadows underneath the countertops, the reflections in the hallway. We're getting more depth in the reflections, all these recessed panels in the doors. Everything's got a little bit more depth in it. And it still looks like we've got a sun lighting into the room.
Well, what do you attribute that to?
I haven't quite figured out why that is. And it only works when the two values, the exterior user added light and the interior lights, are kind of within the same range of each other. And it's interesting because if you adjust, let's just adjust our exterior light, and I'm going to make it a little bit like a lighter gray.
How do you know that's the exterior light? How'd you know that?
It's just labeled an added light, and it's the only one I've got in there, and it's black, and it's 35,000 light intensity lumens.
Thanks.
So I'm going to change this to just like a lighter gray, and what you're going to see is that it looks like someone just turned up the sunlight. Let it process this window out. That window material, the reason that window was just glowing just then, just so you guys know if you ever run into that problem, is because that window material has some kind, it's got a lack of roughness. It's got some kind of a gloss to it. If you turn the roughness all the way up, it won't do that glowing thing anymore because it won't be picking out the exterior light as its source of illuminance. So if we were to redo this and I wasn't presenting, probably could have done all of this in about 10 minutes. And already you can just see just the quality of the scene. We're getting some artifacts because I think we're streaming in the ceiling and everything like that. But the general quality of the scene, the shadows and everything, it looked pretty good. We've got a pretty good sense of depth. You're going to want to mess with, the level of the gloss on the countertops. You might want to pick better models for the chairs. The chairs have some jagged edges to them that you're really not going to be able to iron out. Here, let's actually, before I close this one out, we're going to touch on these light fixtures here. Anytime that you use a chief light, the glass material that they use will usually be heavily improved if you add a gray map to the normal map input. So if I grab a gray map, let's call it 4, you're going to see something happen right here in the preview.
Where did you get those maps? Did you create them?
I just created them, and I'll upload those. They're very simple maps. They're they're really small maps, and you'll see if as I go up the line here, the material will change the way it interacts with light. So all the way up to 100, and this is almost going to, it should almost come invisible at that point. It doesn't look like the preview is updating though. Let's just leave it at 5. Oh, there we go. That kind of changed the way it looks. It's almost like it's running a filter on it though. It really does clean up. So let's just let this.
So Rene, those maps are just like a plain color, are they? There's nothing special about
them?
They
are. They're just a plain color.
Okay.
Yeah, and you see it kind of took out some of the jagged, like we were seeing faintly like the vectors of this, and now it smoothed that just a little bit. This works particularly well if you're using like glassware in your scene. And that's the next thing about rendering is in my library, I have things that, I have a whole kitchen folder here, and within my kitchen folder, I have a couple of different things that I call kitchen dump, kitchen entourage dump. And this is just a collection of like countertop items that it's a CAD block, and I literally just drop it in the scene, unblock it, and then spread it around. If you can see this.
Can I just ask a quick question here?
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things, this is physically based rendering right now, right?
Yes.
If you have a bathroom with a glass shower stall and glass door, I found that the physical rendering has a very difficult time with that. If you do a real render, it comes out great, but physically based rendering, the glass just disappears. You can't see it.
So we're going to work with some glass in an exterior scene in this next little thing as soon as I close this out. And I'll show you what you can do with glass. And a lot of it has to do with using one of those gradient maps in the normals map section. And then also a lot of times I'll use a bump map. I've got a huge collection of materials. Let me just have you take a look real quick. And so let's just go to concrete and exterior pavement. And so what I'll do is I'll take something that's got very little movement to it, something like this. Let's just get a preview of it. Oh, that's not a very good one because it's got a grid on it. But I'll take something that's got very little movement to it, from gray to light gray or something like that, and I'll put that in the bump map of my glass material, and that forces that glass to have just a slight warp to it. And then once it's got a warp to it and you have that normals map to kind of filter and be able to capture and reflect light, now you've got a glass material that will produce reflections. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and close this one out. And do we have any questions about the interior, this interior one?
No, just a comment, and that is it looks pretty darn awesome. It looks really
it's getting pretty good. And a lot of this, again, if we just set our defaults, if you set your cabinet defaults to have those rounded corners, if you set your countertop defaults to have that eased edge, and then you set all your material defaults, and I've got a pretty small but pretty powerful set of flooring materials that I use.
That's not my flooring material, is it? Or is that mine or yours?
This is yours flooring material. Let me just grab.
Looks pretty nice.
I've got this one. This one's pretty good. Well, and the reason it looks nice is because we put that AO map on there, and so like the shadow underneath the couch, that's from that AO map.
You put the AO map on the material. Is that what you just said?
What's that?
You put that AO material on my material on my.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And so I don't know why this material looks so bad.
Crap, guys. Sorry, I got to bail. I got a client calling me, and he's called me 3 times. Sorry.
Well, I think someone's recording this. Maybe.
I'm trying to, and I think Chop is also.
So I'm going to go ahead and let's just grab another one of these plans here. And we've got, you know what, I'll show you that. I actually had that scene that you showed at first here before everybody logs on.
Right.
And I have a saved camera view here. And what I wanted to show you was that I kind of messed with your pool and created a pool material. Let it finish out. So Scott, this is that same house you were showing in the beginning. This is your Ashley.
Yeah, I love
and this is
fireplace. You did something.
This is PVR again. Excuse me. And so a couple things I did in here, and again, a lot of this is just materials. You know, the more time we spend on materials, you create your material library, all of a sudden it becomes, you know, really easy to create these scenes. So I'll upload this water material. I made it just for, I've never had a water material. I never had to do a pool, but it was pretty simple, and I'll just show you how I created it. One is I gave this material the color of what I wanted the reflections to be, which is that real bright neon green there. And then I put in a bump map that was just had some movement, some waviness to it. And I think that was one of these items right here. And eventually I'll you know, have a way to host these these things so that everybody has access to these. Right now, it's just I've got so many materials, it's impossible to upload them all. So I put something with a lot of wavy movement into it, and in the bump map, I put up a pretty high scale on the bump map. And then the normal map is, without the normal map, I lose all those highlights. I lose, where the light hits the top of those bumps. And so again, this falls back to creating a realistic looking glass, right? You can see what happens when we put it's just a black normal map is what I did on right there. And then nothing else. That's as simple as that was. And then you can see down in kind of at the bottom of the pool is I've got a bunch of user generated lights, and they're just shot at an angle back towards the house.
And what is painted that material? Is that a polyline solid that you put there?
Yes, it's just a P solid.
It's how thick?
Just 6
foot thick. There it is.
Yeah, probably it's just a 1-inch P solid.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Exactly. And then for you guys looking for materials and textures, the Chief Architect Library actually has a fantastic stucco texture that you guys should use because it has a bump map incorporated in it. And then Scott, I know that you have been using this, I think it's Owens Corning material. I created a bump map for this material. So, it looks pretty good in its own right without the bump map, but looks even better with it. And then I also have a grass material that'll upload for everybody to be able to use. And then a couple key points. I've got a wood material that I'm going to upload as well for this deck. And the deck, it's challenging anytime you've got something that's got a repeated pattern.
Is that my deck? Is that my deck material, by the way?
No, this is mine. So I made a material, and then what I did was I copied that material 4 times. And then every copy, I either turned it or offset it so that you don't really see any pattern that's discernible. And especially when the sunlight hits it, you can really see how it's moving. And you can see some of the grain in there. And that's because this material has, again, a roughness map. That's a black and white gradient roughness map. So we'll just take a look. I'm gonna just add a new roughness map to this so we can really see what that does. In fact, let's just add this goofy little texture. This is my only problem with PBR. It takes so long to process the material changes.
I thought it looked pretty good before.
Yeah, so look what happened there. Is I put that funny little polygon triangulated thing into the roughness map, and it created this texture so that as we move the camera around and orbit around, that's what we're going to see is these triangles. And you can also see that I utilize that texture in probably 4 or 5 slats. But then the rest of the slots, I interchange them.
Oh yeah, very nice.
So kind of nice to know what those things do, is especially like in a cabinet material, which I'll also upload. A lot of my cabinet materials have a wood grain in the roughness map, so that as you move and rotate around the room, you really do catch those little subtleties, and they just add up. Like I put a bumpness map in the bottom here. And actually, since we're on this plan, I'll show you something else. For you guys doing kind of landscape design and you want to incorporate a little bit of realism, Scott, I know that you were using just the plant images, but I have something where I use the instancing tool. Let me see if I can get to this here, exterior plants. So I've got this CAD block. Let's unblock this guy. And what it has is I have 4 different instances where if we open up one of them, I'm using these shrubs and I'm scattering them every 12 inches. I'm rotating them, and I'm also putting a random scale to them. And this is using the distributed region tool, which I believe you can find, if you're not familiar, under build distributed objects. So you can do a spline distributed region. And so as I move this and scale this, it's going to change, how many items are distributed. And so this is a really fast way to landscape large portions of your landscape design and just kind of give a little bit of entourage to your exterior scenes. And it's the fastest way I know of to distribute plants into a scene. And actually, let's turn these on. I think they're on their own layer.
So Rene, you were mentioning the instancing. Does that mean that those would perform as though there are one object, all the ones in the distributed region?
Exactly. And so we're looking at it right now as these are 4 different instances, and then one tree. I've got one tree in there, and amidst all these guys, and they're actually selectable in 3D, so that if I grab this and drag it way over here, you're going to see that this plant starts generating over here in this corner.
If you wouldn't mind, Rene, when you do something like this, if you just kind of warn us and say this takes a lot of memory and it's going to slow your machine down. And so I'm assuming since you're using instancing, it's really not going to slow the machine down. Would that be correct?
Well, it will. I mean, my machine's actually pretty slow in PBR, surprisingly enough. And I feel like I've got pretty strong specs, and I don't know if that's because I downloaded the new version today or what, but I've been having a lot of slowdowns. But the instancing works great if you're going from 2D to 3D. The lag time's probably 5 seconds for moving, one of these instances around. So if I were to go just drag this all the way down the line, you're probably going to click off 1002, Seems to be taking about 10 seconds. And so something to note, this was kind of a nighttime scene is what I created. And so I'll just show you guys, if I go to adjust my sunlight, you can see the color of the sunlight that I used is like a dark brown. And what happens when we turn it back to a white, and we've got more of like a hotspot sun, right? So between your various lights in a scene, and then also just your exposure settings in PBR, which is underneath technique options, you can really play with the amount of shadows you get. And another thing to note in this for exterior scenes is that ambient occlusion. I've got that ambient occlusion on every one of these material surfaces. So anytime I'm not getting a direct light, we're getting deeper shadows. We're getting a bigger sense, broader sense of depth.
Can you turn off that ambient occlusion on a particular material and just show us how you did that?
Well, let's go ahead and first, let's just take a look and see what happens when I turn it all the way off in this whole camera scene. And let's just see what differences show up. And I mean, I know this is going to be a lot of trial and error for people before they can figure out their workflow and exactly what they want. But I think as a standard, most of the materials I'll be uploading have pretty good settings for this. And it really does help to do a screen clipping before and after, so you see. But you can see right now the side of this house is more illuminated than it should be, considering that we've got direct sun casting a shadow over it.
Rene, would it be easy to get a reflection of the house on that pool water?
Let me think about that. How would we get that? We would need, you'd almost need, it's pretty hard to produce a mirror. So you would need you would need a direct light on the house, and then you would need kind of a mirror quality to the pool water.
Mm.
I mean, you could obviously do it in some kind of a photo editing software, but that'd be a pretty tricky one to do.
Has that pool water got reflection turned on?
It does, but because of my bump map and, you know, kind of the waviness we've got in here, I mean, we can mess around with it. Let's see what we got when we kind of destroy this material real quick. Because we do have reflections turned all the way up. I almost feel like it would need to be like a mirror underneath the water, underneath that material.
Okay.
Yeah, without doing a ray trace, you know, and that's kind of the thing with PBR is you're trying to trick people into not noticing that those types of things.
Yep.
I mean, maybe if there was a way we can mess with metallic, but as soon as you click metallic, it takes away the transparency.
Okay.
You can do what you could try. So, and this is what the metal map is for. This is kind of an interesting thing since we're here. Is metal map again takes white to black gradient, and I can't remember which one is which, but either the white or the black becomes metal. Right. So that if we take, let's just go to I have a catalog of bump maps here. If we take something like this, maybe, it should allow some of this material to still be transparent and some of it to be metal. Curious how well it performs. It would take some serious trial and error to get this right. So kind of interesting. We're seeing the lights underneath. We're getting some kind of reflection. I don't really know what's going on there. I think created an anomaly. Yeah, Chief seems to be really struggling with this. Well, you are getting some reflection. Not exactly sure of what. It looks like it's trying to reflect the backdrop at a larger scale. So something to play with, certainly. I'd buy into anyone that can figure out how to get reflections on the pool, though. That'd be a pretty good trick. And so someone was mentioning about the shower. Actually, maybe we can, Scott, do you have a bathroom developed in this house?
I think if you go back to the Panfill project, there's a nice bathroom you can work with a shower.
Okay. Okay, let's do that then.
Should be on the 3rd floor.
I'm actually going to shut Chief down for a second. It seems to do better if I restart these things. Let's see, this bathroom right here?
Top left-hand corner. Top left.
Oh, top left. Okay. All right, so. Oh, what is happening here?
I think you're looking at the ceiling.
Yeah, it's not letting me rotate. Interesting. I don't know what's going on there. Let's try that again. There we go. That's funny.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's turn our PBR on. I think I already replaced this light with one of my own. Let's check it out. Yeah. Oh, no, that's not. So let's see. And we got something funny going on with this light. You guys haven't, so if you guys are unfamiliar, you haven't checked it out, I've got a symbols and content thread, and in there, I've added a bunch of lights from Chief Architect, you know, not the full catalog, but quite a decent few number of lights in there. And they've all been reworked with new glass material and new lights. So, and they work pretty well. Let's just grab one. And so we want to make this glass give us some reflection here.
You might want to grab that. It's actually a wall. You can grab that and pull it down 12 inches.
Okay, gotcha. So we'll just try, you know, kind of go through the grades of these solid maps. And this is just, at this point, it's an exercise. I hope you guys just know that this is, you know, just a great way of working through any kind of glass material, is dropping a gray map into the normals. And we'll see what kind of happens when you do that. We're getting a little bit of reflection there. The other thing about glass when we're doing it this way is we want to take this off a transparent. We're going to make it a general material, and we're going to play in the range of 50 to 75% transparency, and I'm going to turn the roughness all the way down and specular all the way up.
Okay, now can you grab that wall right there and just pull it down 24 inches just for the fun of it? Yeah, that one right there. Yeah.
So that was kind of a light gray map. Let's just go to the opposite end. We'll go to kind of a darker gray. And you can already see in the preview, the darker picks up a lot of these reflections. So now all of a sudden we're seeing the reflection of the sconce behind us. It still doesn't quite look realistic. I would make an argument about camera placement. kind of hide the shortcomings of PBR is what I typically do when I need to.
And when you get a chance, if you just kind of play with that tile material, because that's my tile back there, see how you would improve that tile on the shower.
So a lot of deal with the materials is that, you know, you've got to have a third-party photo editing software that you're comfortable or familiar with, right? Because it's hard to do anything with it without being able to edit the original material. And I don't know if you guys saw that post from one of the chief architect techs, and he was hired on to, you know, do materials, and he's using that Substance Painter program. But they have an uploader now that creates pretty realistic tile materials within reason, across like materials like marble, and you can kind of get like a stone texture going on. So I have a few different tile textures, and so in this case, you know, I'm not going to take the time in front of you guys to show you how I would fix this material, but I probably have something that I would use to replace it with, and then just tint that tile. And, you know, I have something that's somewhat close, not really. Let's see. And then I can take this and do a blend. And you can see that, you know, I have a roughness map in there. I've got a bump map in there. There's some movement in the tile. There's some recess in the grout lines. And I mean, that's what I have. All these toolbars over here on my left-hand side is, you know, they're labeled Gypboard is that texture I was talking about. It's got a gradient map. We can take a look at that gradient map. In my solid colors, that's just this gradient gray. This is literally what's applied to ambient occlusion on all of my wall materials, which works perfectly well for that. Material's saved and created for anywhere from a 8 foot to 10 foot tall ceilings. You're getting into a gable ceiling, then you need to make a custom gradient, which would be easy enough to do, and then you'd have it in your library and never need to do it again. So a lot of my materials, they have just a black and white base texture, and that's because they're made to be able to be tinted with any one of these colors. And these are just colors saved from the colors library in Chief Architect, so that if I grab one of these and I choose, you know, in my toolbar that I want to blend, which is not showing up right now. There we go. Just the blend option. Then I can tint with any one of these colors on top of an existing. Oh, I think I just hit your glass wall.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
You know, you can tint on top of an existing texture and retain all of the bump map and the reflection maps and everything else there, but you're just changing, you know, the base color, which is pretty clever, quick, easy way of doing it. So that, you know, the more you guys build up your own collection of materials, the faster it's going to be to design these things out and make them look good. Is you're really just going to be dragging and dropping, which is where I'm at when I'm doing design. Is I really rarely create any custom materials anymore.
Sorry, I think the point of this, someone made the comment that you don't really see the glass. And so you've got one glass on the left-hand side, 24 inches below the ceiling, and the other one goes all the way up to the ceiling. Is there a way that you can make that more apparent that is glass?
You know, I think so. Let me try a few things. Let's just.
Like
I think Chief has several glass items with cracked ice and all that now in the library.
Just going to show this to see, you know, what we can do in interior shot is, let's see if I can get any movement on this piece of glass. And so.
It is hard to see the glass. Yeah.
So it's kind of a balance between the color gray that you're going to use in your normal map versus the level of transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really difficult to, there's no one recipe that works because it's totally dependent on the lights in the scene. And so, you know, I can sit here and get this perfect, but glass is one of those things that's just, it's a challenge. You've got a thick piece of glass there too. We're seeing the end of this. This is a 1.5 inch door, isn't it?
I didn't want it to break.
Bulletproof.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go down the line the other way.
There's a toilet over there, Renee. Can you do anything with that toilet over there? That toilet material? What would you do with that? Like it's kind of
Well,
dark.
so the first thing, you know, anytime I see jagged edges, I'm going to do that same thing with, you know, the smoothing angle. We're going to crank it up, see what kind of artifacts we create by doing that. Here we go. Those are the artifacts I was looking for right there with that refrigerator that handled it so well. So that if we turn it back down to 100, we still have it. And then probably if we drop underneath 90, that may disappear, or it won't. I'm just going to leave it. I don't think that's going to be that much of an issue. And then, I mean, really, I would take a look at the Kohler catalog because they've got a lot better looking toilets. They just have high poly count toilets. The other thing is just, you know, messing with the roughness scale on it. It's probably a little bit too glossy. So just to disperse that light so that we're not getting direct reflection off the lid. So in our properties, roughness somewhere in the range of like 20 or so, probably do it. Which is, this light's going to look like it, you know, got blurred.
Oh.
There you go. That looks a little bit more like the plastic we're used to seeing on toilet lids. And then a metamaterial on the handle. But yeah, if we replace this with, say, one of the Kohler.
Ugh.
Oh.
Not that one.
Pretty one, huh? I'm just going to force you to look at it. I mean, just the quality, the difference is, you know, pretty apparent.
Yeah.
It's just a better looking piece.
Now, what would you do with that tile floor that I have there? I don't think I have a bump map on that, do I?
Probably not. So, you know, one of the things is if you're grabbing these from manufacturer catalogs or just the Chief catalogs, yeah, anytime I see this manufacturer tab, I know I can, you know, count on it being in this location. If you grab this, right, and I'm going to copy this and I'm going to take it over to my folder structure. I'm in, obviously I'm in Explorer. This may be a little bit different on a Mac. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete everything up to the point of this zip right here. See how that ends in /deltile.zip. I know that's where that zip file is located. I can't actually click enter and get to the file itself, but I can get to the zip if I delete everything past this point. And if I hit enter, now I'm in that compressed folder. If I go back to Chief and I'm looking at, what am I looking for? Dorian Gray SD94. So Dorian Gray SD94, and I can double click and see that that's that file. And so here's the root of this, that texture, and I can take this and maybe turn it into, a gray map. So let's just grab this. Let's go. What do we have here? So if you guys are familiar with, Photoshop or photo editing software, that's how you can get to some of the files that seem to be sufficient enough, but you want to improve on. And again, every time you take, an hour or 30 minutes to do this and save it in your library, it's just pretty soon you're going to have the best library around.
And so you took that material and you're turning that into a bump map. That's what you're doing?
Yeah, and this particular material is difficult because I don't actually want, well, I don't know if this is supposed to be a smooth tile with just a texture, or is it actually supposed to be like a stone? Do you know?
Should not be smooth, should have some texture to it. Yeah.
So you can almost take this file back into just the way it was. I mean, that's kind of getting away with murder, is anytime you've got something that doesn't need to be that doesn't need to be smooth inside of the grout lines. It's pretty easy to just take that and send it right back into the bump map. Excuse me. So I could take this and immediately we're going to see, some depth in that tile now. And I mean, this case in particular, it's kind of a cheating way of doing it. That's what I would say. And we may play with the roughness a little bit just to get, some reflection off of your lights. We don't have a lot of light peeking in here. Probably need to, let's see, let's look at our sun again. I like to use 60,000. I seem to get a lot more depth in a scene when I'm doing that. And
Oh, that made a difference, didn't it?
definitely seeing some movement in the glass. Again, I wish I had the perfect answer for the glass. You can definitely make realistic looking glass. It just takes a lot of trial and error. Kind of same thing with this countertop. And I will upload one material in particular that I use quite often for countertops, because you can take any countertop, even if it's low resolution, and get that movement we're looking for, that the reflection, kind of the pitting. I have both grain materials and I have, kind of that diamond, little pebble inlay materials. You can see it just on the face of the countertop right now. that reflection map working right here.
Mm-hmm. I don't see a lot of the depth to it, though. I didn't see a lot of depth. Maybe I don't want to, but
yeah, you'll just see, you know, this particular one I just put pitting. Like I've got, I think I just said I've got grain, which just show you what that looks like a veining.
now what is that? What am I looking at right there?
You were looking at, let's just go take a look. You're actually looking at a lot of textures that I got straight from the Caesar Stone website. And I think it was a Caesar Stone, it was a Google search with the limit of it being from the Caesar Stone website. Let's see.
So you're actually using a material as the bump map? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, exactly. So I'm using a texture that I grabbed from their site.
A texture or
Scale
material? Or is it one and
yeah,
the same?
So that particular one, all I did was, I've got one in here called Piatra Gray. This guy right here. And so I'm sending this into the roughness map. So again, everything that's kind of a dark gray to a black is going to be polished, and everything that's white is going to have no sheen to it. And then if you're familiar with Photoshop, you can kind of normalize this so that the white actually is like a light gray, and then the dark gray is just a slightly darker gray. And you can get really subtle hints of that. That's how I do a lot of wood textures. Like we'll go take a look at some of the wood textures.
Rene, I know this is Perry. I noticed that the scenes are kind of dark. Is there a reason why you do that? Well, I mean, is there a lights on, lights off type of deal where you can?
You know, it could be a lot of it. A lot of it is that I've got a really high backlit monitor and I'm looking at something different than you.
Okay.
So I would do that in the technique options, and just in camera exposure and brightness.
Okay.
You kind of lighten up the whole scene here.
Oh, okay, that's it. So that's a quick fix.
Yeah, quick fix. I have both of my monitors have a real high backlight, so I probably see a lot of things differently than you guys, which is
Probably,
you know,
yeah.
good comment.
Probably 4K too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So a lot of these wood textures I'll use, like you'll see that this texture is pretty much useless for anything but a roughness map. It's just got very subtle differences between your dark and your light gray. And I create a lot of materials. I mean, I'll just show you guys this for fun. But some of these materials end up being really complex, and so it's nice if you can just do, you know, a Google search, especially if you do Google search that's like seamless as a keyword and normals or normal, because then maybe you get a package deal. You get the texture file and then you get a normal file as well. Because I wouldn't otherwise encourage people to make their own materials. It takes a lot of time and effort to create. Just give you an example. This is something I'm going to upload probably one of these days soon, but I created this material in this software, and you can probably guess how much work goes into doing this kind of thing.
Wow, that's nice. Yeah.
And this is what Chief has started to develop for us, which is pretty cool. Is this particular software can create packages that will allow you as an end user to create materials without needing to know how this software works. But I can actually on the fly change, you know, the look and pattern and randomize. All I did was take an image off of Google and made it tile and randomize, and now I can make something that's really large scale look like it's got no real repeatable pattern. So
Wow.
that textures and materials and content thread that I have, I just have a lot of materials. It just takes time for me to compile it, make sure that they're working, and then upload them. But you'll start seeing them populate.
Well, why doesn't Chief, when they give us these materials, why aren't they like this already? It seems kind of like a waste of time.
I feel like they're working backwards. For one, all of me changing that recess light, that's not just a force of habit or an unnecessary thing. You have to do it because their default lights are point lights. They're not spotlights. And so they give some kind of global illumination. And so you lose shadows. And you'll notice so often that you're trying to do a PBR and your floor is lit up where it should have a shadow. Your floor it looks like it's actually, I'll give you a perfect example. If I go back, let's just.
So those recessed lights, I'm assuming, are my lights and not yours.
Right. So they're all point lights, and they just put out light everywhere. They don't create any halos. They don't they don't do anything with the ceiling.
Doesn't look like they do anything in this scene.
Right. Absolutely doesn't help us at all. And that's out of the box. It's like that. And so no wonder people struggle with PBR. Okay, so if I go into technique options, you notice I don't have this improved lighting quality checked.
Yes.
And so somehow we're getting light at this section of the floor right underneath our exterior scene. So that let me actually go ahead and put a backdrop in here. That's a little more hokey than your generated sky. Oh, and by the way, anybody that's doing this and they haven't changed their default backdrop, Scott was actually doing a great thing in his plan by removing this backdrop. In PBR will take the predominant color in your backdrop and use it to reflect light into your scene, so that if you have a lot of green in your backdrop, your scene will have a green tint to it.
Yeah.
And so kind of the funny thing a lot of times happens with these dark floors, it's actually performing pretty well right now, but a lot of times you'll see that this reflection of the window butts right up to the baseboard, which makes zero sense. And the only fix that I know for that, like right here, perfect example. Why do we have this light right here, right at the base of this door? It doesn't make any sense that we would have any light there, except for maybe this window. But so if we go into those technique options, that's what the global illumination improved lighting quality seems to handle that. It's the only thing I know that will fix it when I run into that problem.
Oh, yeah.
You can see it pulled it off of the door. It's pretty subtle on this scene. I've had some other scenes where it was a really strong instance.
Now, in the very beginning, you were messing around with a scene right here, and it was looking really good. And now it's not looking as good as it was. Why is that?
Oh, yeah, I didn't save it. This is reverted back to the original.
Oh, you didn't save it? Oh.
Save Scott about 2 hours work.
Yeah.
I know. You don't pay for that, man. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to take a look at one more file. If I've still got people hanging on and watching this, let's go look at your last exterior scene here. We looked at Ashley, and that one was Panfill, so it's got to be Leo. Just want to look at the backyard on this one. So Scott, I know this is one of those ones you were uploading in the forum. How do we build this fireplace out and make it look good? And that was kind of a struggle. And I see that we've got some, kind of a goofiness here. But right off the bat, I mean, the really only way to improve this scene, well, I'll tell you right now, you've got what looks like a pretty decent grass texture. I probably would have just scaled down. Scaled down the image that's being used, because we're seeing what looks like a really big shag carpet. Hey, that's my desktop name, isn't it not? Maybe it's not. Is this one of my textures?
I don't think so.
Okay. And then I'd probably put a bump map on the grass. The brick or the ledge rock. Yeah. I think I actually have a ledge rock, and maybe there's a way we can set up a thread on the forums where I'll just upload everything that we talked about here. This does have a bump map. Maybe we'll turn it up just a hair, not too much. A lot of times, Chief performs best when the bump map is all the way to the bottom, which is 0.001. Anywhere in that range from 0.001 to 0.01 is usually what you want to be at. Occasionally, you can go above that. It really depends on what difference between the gray and the black you have in your bump map. And I wish Chief rescaled that so that we could get a little more finite detail, but
okay, are you going to add a bump map to that material?
This guy right here, I think I actually have like a stack stone ledge rock that I've used or that I created some years back. You can just see the resolution in that picture is pretty high.
Yeah.
And you'll see as soon as it has a bump map with it too, I believe. Let's see, that was this guy, Stonewall. Oh, you know what? It's this one and this one.
Rene, how does the scaling of the bump map and the original material affect the result? Does it have to be scaled the same somehow?
Yeah, and a lot of times you can get, especially with like a stone material, you can get away with just changing the material to a black and white gradient, and most photo editing softwares will do that right out of the box.
So using the same image but just black and white.
Exactly, and you can see what happens when I turn this bump map too high up. We just get these you know, kind of crazy artifacts there. It's almost like we've got a minimum threshold put on the material. But immediately we're going to see a big difference here. And so the next thing I do is, when I've got a material that I know is better than every other material in a scene, I'm going to adjust my sunlight so that I'm just grazing that material on one side, and it really highlights that, because it just brings more realism to the scene, right? And you can see here we've got some what looks like over pitting in the interior here, and that just means that I've got that bump map turned up a little too high. It's almost like it's forcing shadows where it really shouldn't be. And so that's looking a little bit better. And so the next thing I would do is, you know, I know you need to illustrate that this is a wall in your construction documents, but really in a 3D view, I would probably take the time and do, instead of a wall, do an invisible wall, and take the time to actually build out a piece solid, because then you can kind of clip those corners and really make it look realistic, because walls change the orientation of the material that's being applied to them as they hit the corner, and you can see that we don't have a continuation at the corner there. I'm going to do the same thing with that AO again. And then let's get back to my overhead view. Thanks, guys, for being patient. You can ask me questions too, or make any comments while I'm kind of working through some of this stuff.
So Rene, do you actually make your money doing renderings or condocs or what?
I do. Most of my money comes from design and condocs. So I do full plan sets, including prescriptive measures.
Yeah.
So I'm in California, so I just go by the building code and do prescriptive structural calcs and full condocs. Most of my condocs end up being like 15 pages long. They take 20 to 40 hours, depending on how difficult they are.
Yeah, that's kind of what I do.
Renderings are more of a, I do freelance work, and so most renderings come from that. And really, the only time people pay for kind of the high-end renderings are developers, or they're building out a property, and then they want to advertise it on the market, so they need something that looks realistic.
Yeah.
So they can put it in print media. That's where rendering really pays for itself.
Yeah.
I probably trained myself on a couple jobs that paid for the training.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pull this, and I'm going to use this the fillet tool, and just holding control. Let's just grab this. I just made it ridiculously huge so I could find it. I hate looking for these piece solids when they just don't end up being where you expect them to be. But you can see the material wraps that corner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A heck of a wall, Scott.
Yeah.
And if you're going to work through and struggle through creating those walls anyways, I just figure that those pieces are just so much faster, and then they just represent so much, better in 3D views.
But the material list isn't right.
Yeah, right, exactly. Does anyone use those? I've been
Not
trying
me.
to use those.
No, it's tough to use them when we're doing remodels, I think, because everything, half of it's new, half of it is existing. So
Yeah, I feel like the only time it's been viable now is the new the reference plans, being able to just build your addition in a totally different plan.
yeah, that seemed like a whole lot of work too. That seemed like, yeah.
So here's what I was talking about probably about 5 minutes ago is, I know this material looks good. Now I'm going to do something with my sunlight to highlight it, and so just got that sunlight grazing this face and really get a sense that this is a round rock looking, piece. And then on the deck itself, if I tab in and let's just say I delete a board, it's going to turn off auto generate if you had auto generate on there. Probably not. That's just my quick way of turning off auto deck generation. And then I just created 4 or 5 different deck boards with different orientations, and that's just a quick way of making this deck kind of sing.
I'm sorry, what did you just do?
Well, I didn't know if you had auto generate on your deck planks here.
Probably.
A lot of times I do.
Yeah.
And so rather than going in and like into the menus and turning it off, I'll just delete a plank and then and then undo it, because it'll stop that auto generate for me. So I believe in my maple, there it is, live edge maple. And so now you can paint just a component versus, the entire assembly. And it's worth putting this in vector view, because otherwise it just takes forever. And I'll go through and paint a bunch of different slats.
Mm.
And I mean, really, the question is it worth the time to the client?
There you go. Yeah.
How realistic do you need to make this? I think out of the box, though, really most people get best bang for the buck is, collecting materials and then really utilizing and realizing how light's playing with the scene and how you can adjust the light. And don't be afraid to turn your lights into dark black or color lights. They actually do some pretty cool things for dramatics in the scene. Like, let's just take a look at what happens when we turn the sun black. Definitely gets some different environment.
It's very muddied underneath that porch roof. You wanted to clear that up. What would you do with that? Yes, there's just.
Yeah, we've lost a little bit of our contrast and everything, right, underneath here.
Yes.
I think our exposure's cranked up a little bit here. You might want to, add a user-generated light that's to serve as ambient light there. I also don't think I want to improve lighting quality, and that'll kind of sharpen things up in there. The other thing is if you adjust your active camera, edit your active camera, a lot of times I feel like bloom really does some pretty bad things to a scene as far as clarity is concerned. Take off bloom,
Wow.
you can get some resolution back.
Now my hearth should be the same color as the other stuff, as white. Did you change?
Yeah, you've got some kind of artifacting going here. What's happening is, I believe maybe this wall is carrying through underneath, so it's not picking up light above ground. Yeah, that's kind of strange. So I think what's happening is it's gathering light from underneath the deck and treating the whole material as that dark material.
Wow.
Kind of strange.
Yeah.
Definitely looks like especially this one. Look at that one. That one looks so much different. It's the same material though. So that's just another argument for building this out of P solids.
That might make a nice evening scene with a fire in there and some artificial lighting.
Yeah.
Drop the background off, make it a sunset.
Right. It can be very dramatic. I mean, it's a great looking house, Scott, honestly. Something to play with if you've got a TV in a scene. These are, funny little nitpicky things, but you can turn emissivity on, make this guy glow.
Mm. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, I mean, we could turn the scene in the background to just a dark sunset. Same thing with the landscaping here. Is there anything else you guys want to go over?
I think I'm getting pretty saturated, but I will say that this has been very enlightening. I certainly appreciate this.
Here's something to see, just your terrain model. You might want to you could probably increase your contours, or...
I'm only going to give you these 3 songs right now. I mean, these 6 songs.
Oh, I hear someone kind of talking. Is that someone talking?
Yeah, somebody.
I think it would be less confusing.
Joseph the Sierra.
For you. And then for Sunday, I'd have
You're just going to add 1 song for Sunday? Okay.
Oh, Joseph's talking to someone.
Okay.
So what are you doing right now?
I was just taking a look to see if there's anything, I mean, we can go into like the concrete, and I've got pretty much everything in this exterior scene could use that same ambient occlusion, because I want more, deeper shadows in these locations. I want just more depth out of all these materials. And again, I don't want to spend a lot of time doing this, right? So this is all stuff I do it now. I do it in this scene, and then every time I do it again, it's going to be there. It's already going to be set up. It's going to be in my default materials. Take a look at the Chief's stucco material. Yeah, this is one of their materials that I feel like is one of a newer material, but their whole stucco catalog actually looks really good. See, they've got built-in maps in there. That looks, pretty good. Especially their, if you guys ever need kind of a faux sponge look on an interior scene.
Try that Santa Barbara something.
What's that?
Try that Santa Barbara on the stucco. Change all my stucco to a Santa Barbara.
The Santa Barbara, I use the Santa Barbara a lot actually if I'm doing like interior. Let's actually take a look at I've got a kitchen here. I want to show you guys. Got a client that lives just in California tract home suburbia, and they want a Tuscan kitchen. And so kind of a funny challenge.
It looks like Panfill, by the way.
What's that?
That kitchen and layout looks like Panfill. The one I just...
Yeah.
The kitchen in the living room?
Exactly. Just a big... Everybody wants big...
Nothing new anymore. It's all... Nobody invents anything. It's just how you apply it, like Renee's doing.
Right. It's all on your resources, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, I paid a 20-year-old kid to spend 5 hours Google searching textures and create a library for me, and I didn't do any work on it at all.
Wow.
So let's see, what are we looking at in here?
Wow, that's some good stuff, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and this isn't even a saved camera. Keep that in mind. I have not done any editing to this camera at all. I haven't done any editing to the lights at all. No saved lights, no saved sun. So this is just out of the box. I drew this kitchen, and this is how it looks.
So why does it look so good?
And your materials.
From my materials, I just saved materials and set them as defaults. And that's it. So these are straight out of my library. I didn't have to rework the scene. I didn't have to, mess with any of that stuff. So I hope that's encouraging to people that think that you need to spend, an inordinate amount of time doing PBR. You don't. You can just draw your kitchen and have it look like this. This is that material we were looking at in that, in this second program. This material right here. And I just dropped it in as a paint and spray kind of thing. So.
And you know where to get that material too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You know where to buy it, because you can't just put any material. It has to be.
That's true to an extent. That really depends on your own, client base and how you're set up. I work with a contractor, and everything's kind of a place marker. It's it's implied. A lot of times I don't need to source the actual material I'm making, but occasionally I do, and I'll actually scale the material and try to mimic it exactly. Okay. But for the most part, I can get, someone can send me a picture of something, and I probably have something that looks similar enough.
Yeah.
So just, this granite in the back here, you can see as we move around, you see the, the gloss, the dispersion there, the pitting, same thing. The wood textures, the chopping block, as you move around, you can see kind of like a whitewash come over the chopping block. I didn't bother fixing the edges, the orientation on the edges, but you can see from this angle, it looks like there's, an old chopping block to this. The brick material is something I've uploaded before. You guys can get a handle on that. And then if I need to, I'll go to, say, plan materials, and let's see, do I have a quick button for that?
Rene, you should somehow figure out how we can all chip in to pay this guy $18 an hour to put these things together. I'd be willing to chip in.
Right. Well, and distribute them. Well, if someone has a website and they want to host materials, I pump it in their way. I know Michael, Alaskan Sun, is thinking about doing that, and I've offered to host on his. So this section right here, I use this a lot. I'll go to plan materials. I'll find a material that I'm using. I'll duplicate it, and then, so let's just grab something. Sure, this dark wood grays. I'll copy this, and then I'll take the copy, and all I'm doing is in its texture properties, I might rotate it. I might, this is a stretch to fit, but I might rescale it. I might set the offsets and then save it as dark wood glaze number 2. And that's kind of how I did these beams, is these beams are just a duplicate of these beams in the ceiling, and they've been turned or rotated a little bit, and it doesn't really take that much time. And then you save them in your library, and you make a subfolder, and it's wood beam number 1, 2, 3, 4.
Are we looking at PBR right now? Is that
yeah, we are.
Okay. Those materials are awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I just get a kick out of it because, you know, I don't really have to spend much time doing it, and it looks good. And it looks good right in front of the client. That's the other thing, is I don't have to, you know, I can go and draw right in front of a client and have it look good right in front of their face. I don't have to take it home and spend a bunch of hours trying to figure out how to make it look good to present to them. It's already there.
Sure. Just a heads up, I do want to end this at 7 o'clock sharp, so.
Sounds good to me. I'm gonna go eat some brisket. I got cooking. So does anyone have any additional questions? Anything they want to focus on or talk about?
Yeah, can I get you to do all mine for that $18 or whatever it was?
Yeah, I just got to figure out a way. You know, I'm a pretty busy guy. I've been trying to file through that stuff, but I just got to figure out a way to host them. Now, I'm not quite comfortable giving access to my cloud service just because, you know, I guess I'm not ready for that. But it would be nice if we could host it on a website.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Because a lot of this is really just playing around with what items I've got here.
So some you paid some kid $18 an hour for 5 hours to create how many different materials?
He did a, you know, I will say I did it several times. But the initial time was just a dump of every material he could find. And what he was doing was he was finding large groups of materials, and then I was needing to extract them from a software. So this is a material file from Thea, and all I did from that is extract it like it was a zip file, because that's pretty much how they're compiled. Is they're compiled in some kind of compressed format. But if you go in, let's just take a quick look. So a lot of these, you know, if you click on one, it can typically lead you to others and then get to that site. And so it took a lot of this type of thing. It took patience, which was just, this person was just clicking through, finding an item, seeing if it was a collection or not. And this is just an image search. If we do it, you can probably, well, seamless.com, take a chance on it. A lot of these will probably charge you $10, $20 for a package of items. This doesn't look like a texture site at all.
It was a food site.
What?
Hell, it's making me hungry looking at that.
Yeah, so he would pick up stuff like this, like a texture pack, right? And, you know, I think he was searching free. We didn't pay for anything that we found. And it was these collections like this, like Thea on its website has a collection of Thea textures that are free. It's just you need to be able to figure out how to extract them. But yeah, with a little bit of direction, I told them I'm looking for wood seamless textures, brick seamless textures, stucco seamless textures. And all he did was save a bunch of them, you know, started to rename them. So I don't have a good asset for you guys. I wish I knew a website off the top of my head that had these kind of things. I probably have about, I think this whole material catalog that I have here is probably, yeah, it's 16 gigabytes, quite a bit of data in here. And I frequently go to things such as bump maps, and these are just generic maps. Like I think that the pool was created out of this. And this is what created the waves. So a lot of these are just kind of multi-purpose things that you can use them for.
Mm-hmm.
Well, nice.
Well, there you go.
Thanks a lot for doing this, and thanks, Scott, for hosting.
Yeah, super.
Absolutely. You know, I hope this any of this stuff helps. The big one that I would say go back to though is try playing with. You know, I'll upload those LED lights and try playing with setting them to black and setting a user added light to black in the outside and turn off the sun and see what happens. A lot of times just those lights and just those settings can make, you know, normal materials look pretty decent.
Yeah, nice.
Okay, and I've recorded this, so I'd like to listen to it again. Actually, there was a lot of stuff here.
Yeah,
Yeah. Is there a way you can upload that?
The recording?
Yeah.
I'm going to try to. Yes.
like
Okay.
YouTube.
Right. I used to do it all the time, but I don't do it so much anymore. So I'll see if I can remember.
It takes a while, doesn't it? Especially for this one.
Yeah, it'll take a long time. So I'll try to
we went
get
for
it the next day or so.
Hours.
I think Chop did it. Chop also recorded this.
What kind of internet speed you got now, Scott? I got an upload speed of a gig.
I'm not even sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I pay a lot extra for it, but
we should probably get you to record then, Perry.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have a Snagit. I guess I could record the screen with that, huh?
This would take me all night to upload at 2.2 megabytes.
Ooh, that would.
Oh, I'm faster than that.
I upload a 20-page set of plans in 5 seconds.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
I'll try to.
Okay, guys. Thanks a lot, Scott, for hosting, and thanks a lot, Rene. That was great.
Thanks.
All right.
And Rene, really, seriously, thanks very much. This was really enlightening. There was a lot of stuff, but
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a nice speed right
it was
there.
great. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And thanks, everybody.
Sounds good.
And I'll end this right now. Thanks again.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Rene.
All right. Thanks.